So are we ready for the very first panel of the day? Yes? Okay, because we've got an exciting panel, of course. It's about building platforms to drive innovation. And I'd like to invite on stage, up first, Sharad Sharma, co-founder of iSpirit, Rakesh Ranjan, Chief Digital Officer at Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, Mekin Maheshwari, co-founder Game, and the panel will be moderated by Professor Rishikesha T. Krishnan, Director, IIM Bangalore. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for our very first panel of the day.
Yeah, hi, good morning. So this panel has a very interesting topic. It's called Building Platforms to Drive Innovation. We just heard Ganesh speaking about how platforms are, in a way, transforming entrepreneurship. And we have three panelists today who are looking at platforms in rather different ways. So we hope to have a good discussion. So I'm going to start by first asking a question to Mekin. Mekin, of course, is doing some wonderful work in the field of promoting entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education through what is called Udyam. So, Mekin, can you tell us a little bit about how you're using platforms of various kinds to drive entrepreneurship education, how you conceive these, and how they're working?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, as a ex-techie, I don't know if you can ever be an ex-techie, but as somebody who worked in technology in a past life, what I'm going to talk about are platforms of a very different kind. Maybe start with the image of a platform that you see in a railway station, a platform that is meant to take you to different journeys, different destinations. So a platform that, or a set of platforms that we've been able to create are for young people in government schools to experience entrepreneurship so that they open up to possibilities of one, instead of thinking about careers being centered mostly about getting a job, also being open to thinking about starting something themselves. But more importantly, them getting into the practice of doing. A large part of our education remains centered on thinking and being able to, actually less thinking, more just knowing and being able to regurgitate and vomit out stuff in exams. So from there to how do you do stuff? And in the process of doing, making decisions autonomously. Right? So this idea of agency where instead of being told and being obedient about everything at home and in schools, in colleges, you starting to make decisions, you starting and face consequences of those decisions. So those are the intentions behind creating these platforms which operate in government school systems, now across 8 states. To give you an example, in Delhi, the 1,025 government schools have the first period as the entrepreneurship mindset curriculum. And the reason it's called entrepreneurship mindset is that the emphasis is on not profits, but on your grit or your independent thinking, your creativity, etc. And we have these across 8 states. So the 1,025 schools have this as the first period, but then for 11th and 12th grade students, each 11th and 12th grade students for the last 2 years have been getting what I call failure capital of 2,000 rupees each to try and do a business project. Just like you would do a physics project or a geography project, here's a nudge to try and do a business project in groups of 1 to 10, right? And it was very interesting when I read the topic of this panel, which was around innovation. And I was reminded of the kind of business projects that the government school students have done. So as an example, one of the government school students group did a project on, and this is Delhi based, so those from Delhi will relate to it, preventing shop theft. Right? So an alarm system that will do repeated phone calls to a set of numbers that you can pre-configure. And they actually had a 2,000 rupee small phone. like the hardware placed inside the shop theft prevention system that they were selling. As in, later on, they've been mentored and they've now started using just the SIM and APIs, etc. But the idea of people who otherwise are from a disadvantaged background starting to have opportunity and agency and starting to be entrepreneurial will lead to or is leading to innovations which are a lot more relevant in that space. So I think the chances of India to solve the challenges of Indians at scale become a lot higher if Indians from different socioeconomic strata become more and more entrepreneurial. I think we see a lot of it in our lives. Like I think Dunzo is like living the life of a king, or Dunzo helps you do that in Bangalore. So what you experience or what I experience as solving a problem for us, thanks to living in Bangalore and using a facility like Dunzo, the challenges that, say, a village faces, or the challenges that are there amongst urban poor, are best solved by young people in that space becoming more entrepreneurial, right? So that's the kind of platforms we've been able to create. It's very early days, first couple of years of some of this going live at scale with about 2.5 lakh students in Delhi, 4 lakh in Andhra Pradesh, and so on. So slowly starting to build this momentum, but long way to go.
Hey, thanks a lot. That was very interesting. So let me come to Rakesh. So Rakesh is leading a very interesting effort by an organization that you don't normally associate with platforms in innovation, the Reserve Bank of India. He is leading a Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, which is tucked away quietly in HSR layout like many of the startups. So Rakesh, tell us a little bit about, why is the RBI venturing into innovation, and give us at least some early glimpse of what is the kind of innovation you're trying to promote.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for clearing my throat many times. I got a very bad throat, but please excuse me for that. So, sir rightly said, regulators, the way they have been working, and now with RBIH coming, Reserve Bank Innovation coming, Hub coming in, how things are going to change. So, let me give you a perspective here. So, regulators are not really known for innovation or for building platforms, because whatever work they were doing until now was for a very specific job, right? Like, for example, RTGS and EFT were used for, say, online fund transfer. But they were not really open to, entrepreneurs or to innovators, to researchers, to, industry for, further use for customization or building innovative products. But the good news is that, and also having worked in many parts of the world directly with the governments and with the regulators, I do see a huge shift in the way the regulators perceive, the market, the demand of the, the need of the people, of the industry. So I think the things are changing pretty fast. And maybe that's the reason why RBI came with the idea of setting up Reserve Bank Innovation Hub. And I'm pretty fortunate, that way to lead the digital function as a CDO. So Reserve Bank Innovation Hub is little over 2 years old company, but and is led by iconic person by name Mr. Rajesh Bansal, who is the founding team of was part of our founding team of Aadhaar. Even I was part of founding team of Aadhaar, having worked on many initiatives using the Aadhaar as a platform. So that gave us a huge, I would say, a very positive start in the way it transformed the way we do business in India. Okay, and that led to many other innovations. Now, having said that, Reserve Bank Innovation Hub actually kind of implements that idea now. So our motto is having 3 parts to it. One is innovation, which is nothing but, I would say, enhancing the capability of financial sector in India to by leveraging technology, whether it's a platform, whether it's a simple, a technology piece to automate something or to draw efficiency from there. We can also, the second part of the motto, our motto is inclusion, where we are targeting the 1.4 billion people have access to frictionless finance, whether it is banking, whether it is investment, whether it is lending. It can be any function of finance which we are enabling through technology. And last is the impact. So impact is the core of our thinking, our designing process, which ensures that we target the last person in the queue. And that's what is happening with a few of the schemes that I might cover in this session. Maybe after this session we can cover. So that's about what RBH, I would say the principles of our operations. So essentially we are targeting working closely, very closely with banks, with the policy makers, with regulators, and with the industry, just to ensure that where are the inefficiencies in the system? Where are the potential to save cost? Can we make sure that the customer experience improves? Can we make sure that we adopt more and more digital for a quick turnaround, right? So we do have few initial successes. I can just share briefly. We implemented 2 pilots in 2 states, Madhya Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, on Kisan credit card. And you might be aware that KCC is a most sought after as a micro loan scheme of central government, and that really helps give a small working capital to the farmers. Now, issue that we found where it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get a loan, even as low as 1.5 lakhs. Takes up to 4 weeks. Requires tons of documentation, requires many visits to the bank branches, bank official visiting the farmer for verification, for capturing more documents. But with a digital approach, we could really bring down the turnaround time to less than 1 hour. And I can tell you, honestly, we have seen the best case is 2 minutes. A farmer getting a loan of 1.5 lakhs in just 2 minutes. So imagine the power of technology that has been leveraged. Now that gives us a sense, how this can be transformed into a platform by which we can roll this out to the entire country, right? So that's about RBH. I think this is what I can share with you at this stage. But yes, we will have more stories, to share as we go along. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rakesh. Let me turn to Sharad. Sharad, you've been in a unique position as one of the prime movers of iSpirit. You've had the opportunity to shape a lot of thinking on digital platforms in India, particularly in the public domain. How has the thinking on platforms been different in India, and what has that enabled?
So first of all, I think you have a big contribution to make there for many reasons. One of which is that I think you've held this view, which I think influenced this process, that almost all innovation is combinatorial in nature. And so therefore, if you have many building blocks, you can assemble, fairly unique solutions, relatively quickly if the building blocks are already available. So this is really a kind of a fundamental idea. If you want to increase the innovation intensity in any ecosystem, make sure they have many building blocks to use. So one idea that came very early on was that could we take this intraday loan that a street vendor takes, which is, for us, that street vendor is Rajni, and some of you must be familiar with the Rajni slide. It's a 10-year-old slide that's very popular. Can we get her, I'm talking about 2013, can we get her to be in the formal system? Because when she's in the money lender system, she's paying 1% a day, which is roughly 300% a year for that. And if she's in the formal system, she'll have many protections, and the loan interest rate would be much lower. But if we wanted to do that in 2013, even if you're an entrepreneur, it was very hard to do this because the building blocks were not available. So actually, eKYC was originally conceived for Rajni, so that instead of spending 50 rupees to do a paper KYC for her, you could do 2 rupees KYC. That's how Jan Dhan happened, and Jio, many of you used KYC for the first time with Jio when you signed up for their SIM back in time. Then even if she can do that, she has to electronically sign the agreement. So e-sign was created. India uses more e-sign than any other country in the world, but it was actually created for Rajni. If she has a loan agreement, where does she store it? She stores it in DigiLocker. How many of you have a DigiLocker account? It was made for Rajni originally. And then if she has this, then you had to send her money in the morning, let's say 400, 500 rupees, and take it back. You could only do it with a debit card. Debit card at that time charged 1% each way. So we were giving 2% to Visa and MasterCard and taking 1% away from a local money lender. That didn't seem right. So we went to them and said, hey, can you solve this for us? They were very kind. They said they can, because they'll give us a 50% discount. So we said even 1% doesn't make sense. That is how UPI was conceived and created. Today UPI does more transactions. Today it will do more transactions in India than China. I'm going west from China. China, South Korea, all of Middle East, France, UK, and US put together. And we are probably 14 or 15 months away that we will do more transactions on UPI in India than MasterCard will do worldwide. So had they been receptive to Rajini, this may not have befallen them. So, so then if you now have two Rajinis, one pays on time and one doesn't, obviously the one who pays on time should get lower interest rate than the other. But do you think our NBFC and bank will on their own come and say, hey, you're really good, I'll give you a lower interest rate? No, they'll give it to her only when she says, I'll take my business elsewhere. So for her to be able to take her business elsewhere means she must be able to take her data elsewhere. And if some of you are familiar, the account aggregator has been created for that. And there is only one piece that remains. It's called the Public Credit Registry, which has been now announced in the budget as NFIR, National Financial Inclusion Registry. And when that comes in place, so probably 2 years from now, Rajini will be able to get this kind of an intraday loan, which is not possible today. Meanwhile, the MSMEs are able to do this. So there's a pilot working with Gem Sahe that's been very successful. And this whole system is called Open Credit Enablement System. But OCEN plus all the other things that I mentioned to you, put together, these building blocks have to have a name. That name of collection of building blocks is called India Stack. Now, what makes it unusual is that this is actually a public infrastructure rather than private infrastructure. Now, these building blocks can be private building blocks. So, for example, MySQL is a private building block, right? It's an infrastructure that is available to me. I can use it. It is not, in some sense, a public infrastructure. So, what's the difference between, or for example, the iPhone store is a very important building block if you want to take an application and roll it out to the rest of the country. So, what's the difference between a private building block and a public building block? The difference is that in a private building block, you are allowed to charge tax to people who do well in creating value on top of it. So Apple does charge tax, right? 30% tax. Google does charge tax for the building blocks that they have. If you do well on your Maps platform, then they'll charge you more for it, not less, right? Because they say, hey, share some of that value with me. Similarly, that's the case with gaming platforms. In a public building block, the public building block foregoes the right to charge a tax. So if you use, for example, GPS, there is, US government will not say, since you're making so much of money on GPS, pay me something, right? It says, no, GPS is going to be free to use, whether you make a lot of money or you don't make a lot of money. That is called the public infrastructure model. So all these building blocks, it was decided back in 2014 that we should set them up as public infrastructure. And this then has become the calling card of India in the world. Because after that, Health Stack has been created. You've heard of ONDC a little while back. And many, many such public infrastructure has come. Together, that is called digital public infrastructure. And this has become the way that India stands out in the world. And that's become a way for us to create an innovation system that caters to the Bharat market and allows our entrepreneurs to succeed in a way that would not be possible in any other country of the world.
So this is a question open to all three of you. We have mainly entrepreneurs in our audience. So how can entrepreneurs start leveraging these platforms? I mean, how should they be thinking? How should they be looking at these platforms in order to kind of build unique businesses riding on these platforms?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead,
first?
Sharad. Then, yeah.
You know, this is a new model. This jugalbandi between building blocks and private innovation on top of that is a relatively new model. So it's been new to India, and this was not the way our traditional businesses were built. So what has happened is that our startups and our companies were slow off the start. No, so there's a reason why, let's say, Google Pay is shook to UPI faster than most other Koramangala payment startups. I'm not even talking about Bangalore payment startups. I'm not talking about Indian payment startups. And I'm talking about Koramangala. Because this was an unfamiliar model. But for Google, it was not unfamiliar. You know why? So what is Google? Google, there is GPS, do private innovation on top of it, get maps. There is SMTP, do private innovation on top of it, get Gmail. There is HTTP, do private innovation on top of it and get search. You get the idea. So when UPI came as public infrastructure, they were not debating whether to use it or not. They said, sure, we should try and use it. Because that was built into their DNA. Now that DNA was not common, to Indian companies. In fact, the largest UPI player, PhonePe, had a VC term sheet which was withdrawn when they decided to embrace UPI because they said, we don't know. This is not the way to do things. What are you talking about? This is not the way to innovate. So they had to go back to their old employers and say, please, aap thoda paisa de do, right? And they were flush with money at that time, Sachin and Binny Bansal, and there was no way for them to give a loan because the loan required you to be on the board. They said, okay, chalo, hum strategic investment kar dete hain. That strategic investment, they were smart enough to figure out this is a good investment, and they kept investing. And today, the value of PhonePe is bigger for Walmart than the value of Flipkart for Walmart. You know that, right? So this is the power of the model. This model has not been understood. And luckily for now, you have this being taught in MBA schools, this is being taught in the engineering schools, and this is something that we have to teach our entrepreneurs. So, and even big companies, because this is the model that actually works at scale everywhere in the world, whether it's education, it's health, it's financial inclusion, it's drones, any sector that you talk about, you have to talk about this jugalbandi between public infrastructure and private innovation. So my hope is that you will embrace this model now that it's been successful. And I'll make a snarky comment. Now lots of white men are also saying that the India model is very good. So very often we wait for the white man to give us validation. So wo bhi validation hai. So now please embrace this with both hands and make something happen out of that. Thank you.
So this question keeps coming up in every forum whenever we meet entrepreneurs. Always there's a question, why platform, should I use a platform? Kya benefit hoga usse? So I think the kind of, the opinion that I have, maybe it's a personal opinion and a lot of people will agree with that. I see a platform as an agent for productivity and innovation, right? As an innovator, as an entrepreneur, you have got a very specific job to do, right? So focus on the core, all right? And there's always you're always short of money, right? Whenever you're an entrepreneur. And I can tell you from my experience, for 3 years, I was at home hoping to become an entrepreneur till COVID killed my dream, okay? So, so I know very well that, it's always the cash flow, that's always the worry on my mind, okay? As even other speakers have also echoed the same thing. So the point is, just focus on the core. That's very important. Let everything be consumed on a pay-as-you-go basis, right? And we are fortunate to live in a time where like platforms like Amazon, Azure, they're offering you infra as low as $500. You can actually get started with that, which is nothing actually to put in. But that gives a jump start to your business. You are able to focus on your core. So that's our productivity. Innovation, a lot of things have been done. Why not build on top of them? So again, a platform will play a role there. And make sure that your cost remains low. You get a faster go-to-market kind of a scenario. And make sure that in this process, you also integrate with the community. The community participation is also key to success of platforms. That's what we have been also kind of advocating whenever we meet people, in various forums. Why not build communities around the platforms? People who innovate, why not share your ideas, share your deliverables, share your products, whatever you can, to whatever extent. Make sure that we grow as a community. So I think for the entrepreneurs, the question to be asked is, now that platform is there with me, what's next? So platform is a given. It has to be used for productivity and innovation. That is my take on that.
Again, any comments on
Yeah, I'll just add to what Sharad said and bring in this piece about, so the PhonePe founders, both willingness and grit to stick to like, okay, we want to use UPI, we want to experiment with it. Yes, it is nascent. As in banks are coming on board, this process is happening as we go, but we think this can be powerful. And as entrepreneurs, taking that bet and continuing to operate and iterate alongside, led to today PhonePe being the largest UPI player, right? That they are, as in more UPI transactions happen on PhonePe compared to all other platforms. And I think this willingness to experiment, this willingness to bet specifically on pieces that are getting created from scratch. So, like as a techie, I would define a platform as something where the number of use cases that can be built on it have not been imagined by the creators, right? That what is possible. And that is for entrepreneurs to come in and create. So I feel today not enough experimentation is happening on account aggregators. And I believe like they can be revolutionary in terms of the kind of data that they enable and the kind of value that they can unlock for users. Account aggregators can be revolutionary. Absolutely revolutionary. But the number of entrepreneurs wanting to explore, understand, play with, iterate, and then try and come up with business use cases, right? Because entrepreneur is the one who's eventually going to create customer value. That needs to happen a lot more, and that requires risk taking and requires experimentation. So my encouragement would be look at some of the public infrastructure that is coming up and start experimenting with it, play with it, see which of these modules or which of these building blocks can be useful in creating value for your customers, and then create value.
The kind of role all three of you play is quite different from the typical entrepreneur. So you're, in a way, creating platforms and playing fields so that others can succeed. So how do you look at this differently, and what motivates you to do this? Because there's, I mean, at least on the surface of it, there's no pot of gold waiting for you individually out of this. But something seems to drive you to do this kind of, in a way, public service to create the platforms that others can benefit from. So just like to understand a little bit about your individual motivation, what keeps you going, and what is the kind of philosophy you need to do to keep up the momentum for these kind of activities. Mekin, I want to start with you.
Thank you for. Yeah, I think. So when I started Udyam in 2017, I wrote a one-pager in my bad handwriting, and it started with the unfairness of the ovarian lottery. Right, that I believe that the ovarian lottery is unfair. Right, it's a separate matter that I'm also a deep believer in karma, but I can hold both of those beliefs together. Right, that just because somebody is born at a place where they do not have access, they do not have the means, should not limit their potential, should not limit what they should be able to achieve. And I feel it is our job as a society, as a community, as a country, to enable individuals to be able to unleash their potential, right? To be able to live up to their full potential. So that core philosophy is what drives me. I think along with it, there is this illogical romance about India as a country, which is like, hey, there's just so much richness here. There is so much diversity. There is such beautiful values that come true for us as a country, and yet so many challenges, right? That we've seen massive growth. I've been lucky, seen amazing growth in the startup ecosystem. But then, if you think about how inclusive that growth has been, I feel there is a lot more for us to do to make that growth a lot more inclusive, for it to be truly meritocratic, right? I am very clear that, hey, people who want to do more, who have more potential, should grow more, right? But we have to take off the hurdles. So creation of these platforms are a way of removing some of these hurdles. That's my drive.
What keeps me going is something that, Okay, let me give what I was before, what I'm doing currently is like, or last 10 years. Typical tech background from IT industry, doing the mundane job of delivery, okay, and having the same issues of, scope, cost, change request, invoices, and that, that just made me, I would say, really upset. Till I moved to Aadhaar, I was part of the founding team and really got a chance to work on many, uh, I would say, many ideas that, the government of that day had and the team that Aadhaar had at that point of time. So I realized that the passion to work for the country, and as Mekin also said, romance for the country, right? Now, that is something that keeps me going because having worked on many things, and I'm sure in Aadhaar, whatever you see, maybe I got some contribution there, so I'm pretty proud of that. And building Aadhaar from scratch, and this telecom eKYC, the SIM, using eKYC for SIM issue, all that from doing from scratch gave me enough kick to keep going and then continue the same stream. Then worked with many governments after my Aadhaar days as a freelance consultant through ADB, World Bank. Now that gave me a confidence that whatever ideas we had can be implemented. So they are not like a pipe dream, they can be implemented. They can be really, put into action and people can really, get benefit out of that. So Aadhaar is a great example, right? All of us know how it has changed the way we do business. We operate, the various business processes. Having worked there, then with skill industry, then coming to RBIH, and then working in the fields with farmers, with state governments, with banks, and solving the real problems of the people who don't have access to finance, who are not digital literate, who really want help, right? So working from them gives enough kick, to me to keep going, right? So that's all I can say. Yeah.
Before we hear Sharad on this, just be ready with your questions because next round is open to all of you. Yeah, Sharad, please.
You know, I often say there's something special in Bangalore water. And, I think what has happened is that there's been a confluence of ideas. I don't think it's easy to explain what is happening here, but what is happening here is truly, truly special. And the confluence of ideas, one is the idea of stewardship, which goes back to ISC, Jamshedji Tata is setting that up. And subsequently, I think Narayan Murthy and Premji, introducing that stewardship concept in their companies. And therefore, this concept of stewardship has, in a very latent way, remained in the ecosystem as we go forward. The second thing is the fact that there has always been an R&D base here. And the fact that, from 90s onwards, a large number of multinational R&D organizations came here. That became quite significant, right? And that gave us the ability to think with science and technology as a foundation, which has not been easy to do. Only other places where you could possibly do it is in chemical area because of National Chemical Laboratories in Pune, right? And the third one, which I think is an entrepreneurial culture, which a lot of it came back because lots of people came back from the valley. And I think this has somehow created a magical kind of a portion that is very special. Now, in that portion, there's always been a place for a Steve Jobs and a Linus. Now, if you go back and ask Steve Jobs in his ending days, who is the person that you respect more? He said it was Linus, right? Because today, after all, you have Apple Macs that still run Unix kernel, and you have an Android phone that runs on a Linux kernel, right? So look, even in Silicon Valley, this has been the metaphor that has been talked about. Now, in that context, I think there are individuals that have tended to inspire each other. One of my inspiration is sitting here, Sanjay Anantram, right? Who at one time I used to describe him as the startup ecosystem's best mentor. A group of us would take 4 companies in a year, and this included Ashish of Helion, and I used to think I was cat's whiskers as a mentor too, till you actually started interacting with, and you started watching Sanjay in action. And then Sanjay made that pivot to make something like this happen. Mekin has done that. There's so many that we, I think, feed off all our energy together of saying that instead of chasing material wealth, what if we can actually chase meaningful happiness? And the meaningful happiness comes from being part of something larger than yourself, right? And luckily, systems have been very kind. We have some financial security. We may not be as rich as, let's say, Nandan is, but we are not poor either, right? And so the point is that at some point you are able to optimize for this and say, hey, instead of this, let me go for this. And the environment makes it possible. I'll end with this. In Bangalore, many of you will agree, we have some potential wonderful architects. And they go to the US and they become extraordinary architects. Yeah? And why? Because when you take a person, place them in the right environment, they flourish. They live up to their own potential. I think Bangalore, while it hasn't yet created that atmosphere for architects or for product managers, which was the last session I was here for, but it has certainly created it for ecosystem enablers, where there's really highly talented, committed people who are opting to become enablers of the ecosystem, like the three gentlemen that you see on the stage on this side. That does not happen in other ecosystems, and I would say not even anymore in the Silicon Valley ecosystem. And the ecosystem that's the best example of this in the world is actually the Bangalore ecosystem. So you are privileged to be part of this ecosystem. And hopefully you will also come on this side one day and become part of building the ecosystem, not just your startup as you go forward.
Got the time up notice, huh? So we'll have 3 questions very quickly. So if you have a question, please put your hand up just to make life easy so that I can identify you. And also, please tell me to whom you want to address the question, if you can. Shout.
Hello. Yeah. Navya Devdi here. So my question is this platform, supposed to be a whiteboard where entrepreneurs can build it? I think as a part of innovations, these platforms are, constraining the thinking of the entrepreneurs, right? So it should be a more of free form, like a plug-in and play where, you can build on these platforms. So do you see that innovation in this field is actually constraining the thinking of the entrepreneurs and building the use
We'll
case?
take that as question 1. Question 2, please. Anybody? Yeah, just give him the mic.
Hi, sir. My name is Vardrajan from iDrive Capital. My question is for the gentleman from the RBI Innovation Labs. I remember UPI chairman, gentleman who leads UPI saying that primarily innovation is being very platform driven, whereas we are seeing startups that take these innovation and use it in unintended ways. Example, like when SlicePay was complaining when there were regulations brought in them. How do you see that happening where startups have to innovate and then they get caught in the crossfires when they innovate and then RBI doesn't want them to use that product in a particular way? But then that is what innovation is about, right? Is you have this anarchy in terms of how you use certain things. So
Okay, good. Let's go to the next question, please. Someone this side had the question. Yeah, we'll give that lady at the back, please. Yeah. Sure.
Hello, my name is Shipraj Trivedi. My question is to Mekin sir. I just want to ask what should be the most important ingredients of unconventional schooling that is coming up these days? Since we talked about the entrepreneur for the not so privileged students. So that's one thing. Thank you.
Okay, so what I suggest is, Rakesh, there was a question specifically for you. You take that first. Then Mekin, you take a question which was to you, and all the stuff about people should be able to shape platforms, that's for Sharath. Yeah, go ahead.
So, Vardrajan, I think if I got a question correct, I think you were asking whether RBI dictates startups to use some platform. Is that what you're asking?
yeah, kind of like what happens when you use something that's not how it's meant to be used. Like you say this is the use case, but you use that to do something which is kind of a gray area, right? We are seeing a lot of gray areas in the startup ecosystem, from your Farmeasies to Rapidos. All of them are in gray areas. But that is what innovation is about. So
No, that's, yeah, exactly. That's a part and parcel of innovation, right? You will definitely have gray areas. But I wouldn't agree that RBI would force you, or maybe some regulator would force you to use a platform. Maybe I don't have enough information, but this is what it comes as a shock to me. Somebody is dictating you. Sorry, I think maybe I won't be able to answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's too broad a question, and I feel too small a person to be able to answer that question. I can share my learnings of what could schooling or what might schooling look like. Right. I think the first thing that I've learned is to figure out ways in which it can be a lot more child-centric to the level where you trust the child, you trust the learner. Right. If you start trusting the learner, you start asking the learner. Instead of just telling the learner and trying to fill them up like a pail of water, you start in a process where the learner starts to have choice and starts to have thoughts and opinions. So you're driving thinking. Then that thinking translating into action. My view is that both our education and industrial systems, most of our evaluation is centered only on knowing. Knowing is extremely important, but translating that knowing into action requires often things like courage and many other things, right? So knowing is not equal to doing. And I feel our education system needs to go from one, having a lot more trust in children, to having a lot more focus on doing. And eventually, like all of this translating into meaning for children to be able to define, or for learners to be able to define their trajectories, and given freedom to experiment, but with high expectations of them, right? That help them set high expectations so that they can strive for things which today feel impossible. Those are the three that come to my mind around what could enable unconventional schooling.
Sharad, do platforms constrain or promote innovation?
Yeah, so learning how to use platforms in a way that it will not constrain innovation is something that has to be learned. It's if you are an amateur, it will constrain your innovation, and therefore you have to be disciplined about being able to do that. Now, having said that, I can quickly give you an example why they unlock innovation in ways. For example, back in time, you could only buy the telephone system from BSNL, right? And because they would pre-test those telephone choices and you could do that. Then they said, let's put a standard in the middle, and any phone that complies with this standard can actually connect to the phone system. Now you had many types of phone instruments available because the entry barriers had fallen. I could manufacture a phone without having get it tested and included in the list of phones that BSNL would sell. So that is one type of public infrastructure that is there. It's a standard. The second type of public infrastructure is something like GPS or Aadhaar, which is a building block. You use it as a service. You ping it and it does something back for you, right? And that's the connotation that we've been talking about when we say platform. But the third one, where India is emerging leader, is to actually think of it as protocol. In fact, all the examples I gave you, internet is nothing but a collection of protocols. It's not a collection of platforms. SMTP, P stands for protocol. HTTP, P stands for protocol. SIP, session initiation protocol, P stands for protocol. All these protocols, public protocols, were all built by volunteers in the US. IETF is the organization, volunteer organization that creates those protocols. In India, our protocols are, UPI is a protocol. It's not a platform. On top of it, account aggregator has no back-end system at all. It's nothing, just a protocol. OCAN is nothing but a protocol. ONDC is nothing but a protocol, right? Now, when you use protocol, you have enormous amount of freedom available to you. Enormous amount of freedom. But that kind of innovation is not the innovation that we are taught. Where have you ever learned how to innovate around protocols? It's not a course that is taught. It is not taught in the engineering school. You don't come to this world having learned that at all. So this is something that requires peer learning, mentor learning. We have to also teach it in our educational institutions, because without teaching it, people are at a loss and they do very amateurish innovation, which appears as if these things are constraining, while they are not. So that would be my answer to this.
Great. Thanks a lot. So give a big hand to our panelists, please.
Thank you once again to all of our panelists and exceptional moderation by you, Professor. And of course, all of your insightful and valuable insights. Thank you so much.